be able to put into forestry for their own purposes to earn credits from the ETS themselves. But we're not up for the wholesale selling of farms on high quality land, often to foreign buyers that are actually taking those credits and moving them out to countries offshore where they're polluting.
Why are you delaying the introduction of energy emissions by 5 years? Will you change the ETS law that will see it automatically into the ETS by the 1st of January 2025?
Correct. We're not going to put agriculture into the ETS system at all. We still believe very strongly in a split gas approach. And what we're saying is we want farmers to be able to have the tools and the technologies they can to offset their emissions. We want them to get 100% credit for all the sequestration efforts that they've got going on. That means involving planting wetlands, other riparian planting that they've been doing and that is going on. And then we are going to introduce agricultural pricing, but we're going to get the balance right and we're going to get the sequencing right. I just put it to you today that this government doesn't have a plan. It's a lot of words, but the reality was there was a plan produced a year ago by the sector. The government blew it up, they shot it to bits, and they killed it. And as a result, there's no consensus and no partnership between the sector and the government to deliver anything in this space. And so we're taking a very pragmatic, practical approach to say we back our farmers. We know we've got two big challenges here. We've got two really unique challenges. One is that we are already some of the emission efficient farmers in the world, the best in the world at it. And if we just kill off farming, and as the government proposed, knocking off a fifth of our sheep and beef farmers in 7 years, that production, the 40 million people that we feed, moves to a less carbon efficient place, a farm in another country, and actually global emissions don't change. On the other hand, you can't afford to lose your livelihoods and destroy farming livelihoods when so much of the New Zealand economy and every Kiwi is wealthy because of farming. And so as a result, we've got to find the balance through that. And what we're saying is give the farmers the tools and technology, allow them to capture full sequestration benefits. And yes, we will introduce agricultural pricing, but we'll do it in a sensible way, and we'll do it by 2030 at the latest. Well, I wouldn't say there is actually a plan today. I would say that this government has shot it to pieces. It has killed what was the industry solution that was proposed a year ago. Here we are a year down the road and no one's any clearer about, the farmers aren't any clearer about what's actually happening from this government. And what we're saying again is that we want to be able to make sure our farmers actually have the tools and the ability to be able to offset their emissions through their own efforts, through adopting technologies that don't exist in New Zealand because we've been restrictive in that space, by making sure they get credit for the good stuff that they're doing and the sequestration benefits that they're creating on their own farms, and then introducing agricultural pricing that is sensible and is going to be done well. Those three levers ultimately have to be sequenced and balanced in the right way. But I just put it to you that today there is no plan from this government. Here we are a year on from an industry solution that was shot to pieces, and their only response is to introduce agricultural pricing, which will actually mean that herds get culled, farms get sold, and production moves off overseas, and New Zealanders get poorer. That's something I don't tolerate.
But why do you need 5 years to get the levers going? It's a kind of emergency. Why do you need 5 years?
Well, this government's had 6 years and has done absolutely nothing, and we are in a worse place now than where they were when they came to power. What we're saying is that gives us time to get our farmers ready to make sure they can use the tools so they've got their best approach to be able to reduce emissions. For example, as I said before, when you can legislate to allow methane inhibitors that could have a 30% reduction in emissions, we could do that incredibly quickly. That's a tool and a technology that could be across farming in New Zealand within that time frame. When we think about the work of ag research, developing ryegrass that has 23% lower emission and is more drought resistant, but the trials have to be done in the US and Australia, that's technology that should be available here in New Zealand. We don't want to make our farmers do something with one hand tied behind their back. They deserve a shot at this to be able to do both things at the same time. Absolute rubbish. What we're doing is we're backing our farmers and saying we are going to build a very strong economy here in New Zealand because we're not wealthy enough just to say we're going to go kill farming. What's the alternative? I've heard crazy alternatives from many across New Zealand. Cull all our herds, shut down our farming. That will make every single New Zealander infinitely poorer. That's not what we're going to do. But equally, we are also the most carbon efficient, emissions efficient farmers in the world, and just shutting down New Zealand production and moving that offshore to some less efficient farm or place isn't acceptable either, because it doesn't help global greenhouse gas emissions. That's the dilemma that we have, and what we're parting is a course through that to say we can do that with tools and technology, we can do it with sequestration benefits, and we can ultimately do it with agricultural pricing.
Just one final question.
What do you say to climate scientists who say what you're proposing goes against the advice of the IPCC and the Climate Commission? Are you actually listening to the scientists?
I am listening. What I'm listening to is a balancing that we have to do to make sure that our economy continues to grow. New Zealand's economy is declining. This week we may end up in a technical recession. That is not a good place for New Zealand. We cannot just afford to turn things off that we don't like. And what I'd say to you is our farmers are the best in the world. We need to back them. They've been treated as villains over the last 6 years by this government, and they generate so much value for every single New Zealander. And I think New Zealanders understand that. So I want us to back farmers. I know that they've made tremendous progress over the last 50 years. They'll continue to make progress in the next 50 years. We are serious about delivering the 2050 net zero goals, but we're also serious about growing our economy so that New Zealanders can get ahead and do well in the world.
How will you get these tools that you've been talking about? A big part of your rocket was using that revenue to fund R&D, to get the technology.
I'll let Todd.
Yeah, thank you. Well, the sector itself, through a partnership with the major companies and some of the agricultural leadership groups, have been contributing, collecting levies, contributing already. We support that, but are putting in that we expect them to continue that. In talking to them and to the science community, actually the number one thing that needs to be done to deliver those solutions is to get some of those regulatory roadblocks out of the way. I mean, there's an example of a ryegrass that was developed in New Zealand that's being trialled in Australia and America that soon will be in commercial use there, but it's not able to be trialled or used in New Zealand. Well, quite frankly, that means that the hard work of New Zealand scientists and New Zealand taxpayer money is helping others meet their obligation. And so the government's approach to this is to charge farmers more money and to create taxes for them. They've now run out of time. They promised to actually have an agreement and legislation this year, and actually, Damien O'Connor and the Labour government are dreaming up taxes from a fertiliser tax to anything else, so they can tell the New Zealand public that they are meeting that promise that they made. Well, actually, we think it's better to back the farming community, to create a true partnership with them, to get the regulatory roadblocks out of the way so that those solutions can be delivered and can be used, and not just to punitively tax them that puts up the price of food for New Zealanders, or actually closes down farms and sends them overseas to much less carbon efficient countries.
But back it with whose money if the agri-pricing isn't going to be introduced?
Well, the government is saying that because there are no solutions, they need to tax New Zealand food production to get some money to go off and find those solutions. Well, actually, scientists, our universities and the farming community are saying they have contributed themselves. The challenge is not money. They have provided that. It's actually those regulatory roadblocks to get them out of the way. This is a government that says every time there's a problem, let's dream up another tax. That's why food is so expensive in New Zealand. It's not because of the farmers wanting to charge more, it's because of the regulatory costs that's being piled onto them. If you take a care of this farm that we're on at the moment, a balanced farmer, environmental farmer of the year a few years ago, they've fenced off and planted all of the waterways and riparian strips. They've planted pine trees on areas that would be less efficient for farming, but actually, because of the cost that's being imposed or the new taxes the government wants to pile on them, they either have to reduce their production, i.e. have fewer sheep and cows, or plant trees. Well, that's not good for the New Zealand economy. It doesn't help us feed New Zealanders, and it certainly doesn't help New Zealanders pay the bills by exporting overseas and selling to markets that want high quality, safe food.
Mr. Luxon, do all 14 industry bodies support your policies like you did with
Well, what I'd say today is that He Waka Eke Noa sadly doesn't exist anymore. The government shot that to pieces when the industry solution was introduced in May last year, and 3 months later the government overreached and it blew it all apart. And so there is no He Waka Eke Noa anymore. There is no consensus across the industry, and certainly there's no partnership between the sector and the government. We've had good support in the conversations that we've had with some of those industry bodies already, and we expect to have more throughout the course of the week as well.
So is that answer no, that you don't have support from all of those 14 bodies?
We have a good support. I can't remember whether it's all 14, but I've spoken. I know Todd has spoken to many of them. What would you say, Todd? Would be the best answer?
Look, we've been working very closely with the sector, with those bodies, and with farmers directly over a number of months. We've started to build what actually is a true partnership with them. It's something the Labour government said they wanted to do, and they turned their back on farmers and walked away. It will be for each of those to speak, those groups within He Waka Eke Noa to speak for themselves, but there is very strong support for that. Anything that there are still challenges with, we're committed to working with them and finding solutions. That's something that's been accepted by all.
But Todd and I have met with the sector heads, all 14 of them, multiple times, as a group and as individually. Yeah.
And just another question, Mr. Watson, when was the last time you were on a farm, and have you ever milked cows?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. Earlier in the year, actually, down in South Auckland. And the last time I was on a farm was probably just a couple of weeks ago, to be honest. So I try and get out on I mean, it's a novel idea, but I go to Wellington Tuesday, Wednesday and try and get out of there as fast as possible. And actually spend Thursday, Friday, Saturday going up and down this country, often doing a farm visit, sometimes every week, sometimes every couple of weeks. So, no, I spend a lot of time on farms, and I like spending time with the 35 to 45-year-old young farmers who have to think very deeply about where farming and agriculture goes in the next 50 years. And I tell you, we've got some uber smart people, and it's an incredibly exciting and fascinating industry. And I just wish more New Zealanders could actually experience it and actually see it for themselves. If you just watch the Dairy Industry Awards, I just encourage the media, why don't we televise that? Because I think you'd be really inspired by the amazing young people that are in this sector and the incredible things that they're doing. So, yeah. Well, with that, can I say thank you so much? Oh, sorry, last question, Nicole. Yes, sorry.
Just from our gallery team, I just want to know, doesn't this mean New Zealand won't meet its target of 30% methane reduction?
I'll let Simon answer that. Is climate change?
No, it doesn't. Actually, in our view, we have the ability to meet those methane targets. Our policy does also include a review of the measures for methane, and we will be driven by the science in regards to that. Overall, this is a long-term game. We need to be net zero by 2050, and we're confident that this policy will enable us to do that. It's critically important. 50% of the emissions come from this sector, and this policy that we've announced today will allow us to achieve those targets. What I said before is that our view is that we are on track to be able to achieve our goals in 2030. What I'm outlining to you is actually this isn't all done and dusted at 2050. We need to take a long-term perspective. This is a marathon, not a sprint.
So the technology is there, saying reduce emissions. Why not simply just price the emissions or graduate it over a much shorter time frame, and then you can make your own decisions on how to accommodate?
Well, look, in the end, farmers will make their own decisions about how they reduce methane when those tools are available. They may be available around the world. They're not here today. And so our commitment yesterday, announcement, was to create a regulatory regime where we can focus on biotechnology and make sure that is available both for trial and use commercially in New Zealand where it is safe to do so, and like-minded countries are doing it also. When those tools are available, then farmers will be obliged to take them up, and there's a price as a backstop to do that. But think of it this way, what the Labor government has said is by 2025, if you don't do what we want, we're going to put you into the ETS and put a price on you, right? Well, actually, if there's nothing a farmer can do other than having less stock, that's not good for the New Zealand economy, and it actually doesn't mean that those farms will survive. It's almost as bad as the punitive ute tax. If you're a tradie or you're a farmer or you work in the forest, there isn't anything other than a diesel ute you can use. So the Labor government might as well double or triple the cost of the ute tax. It would be just as ineffective as changing behaviour on farms, because there isn't an alternative. What we're saying very clearly is we will meet our obligations in 2050, but we believe that actually for agriculture and methane, the 2030 target is likely to be met or very closely met, and therefore we need to provide the tools with them to measure methane emissions at an on-farm level properly and effectively, because the Labor government has failed to deliver upon that, and then set up an independent body to decide upon what a price would be, and then that will help affect the change.
So will you be using like the GMP or the GMP 100 standard?
So look, that's something that when we set up the pricing body, that they will make decisions around that. It's not something that we would announce today, but it's very important that the very best science informs that, and everything we do will be based on science.
But isn't the pricing the critical factor here in terms of encouraging? You can have the technology available, but if the price isn't high enough, then
well, that's why we're going to set up a pricing panel to assess those based upon the principles around pricing that was set, and to make those decisions. You'll see in the policy document that we will, through legislation, create the framework for them to do that, set the time frame for them to, which is no later than 2030, and then they will make that decision. Currently the Labor government has the Climate Commission offering them advice, and then they get to do what they want. What we're saying is this body that will be established will make that decision, decision. It won't be for Cabinet to then agree it, but the Minister of Climate Change and the Minister of Agriculture will have a veto over that if we think that it won't drive the outcomes we require around reduction, or if it's going to just merely push jobs and production overseas.
But the time frame of pricing this has been pushed out, right? So can you understand the frustration of some people who are concerned about the climate change issue?
No, I think the frustration is New Zealand is a good government that's been promising big, and for the last 6 years actually imports more coal than ever before, and we're in a worse position, not better. We don't solve these problems through press releases from the beehive. It's from actually having tools to allow the New Zealand economy to adjust and to keep people in jobs. If we do what the Labour government has said they will do, which is put the farming into the ETS in 2025, farms will close and that production will go overseas. It'll go to countries that are less carbon efficient. They will feed the world, we will be poorer, and the climate will be worse off. We're not willing to do that, but we have an absolute commitment to meeting the 2025 net zero target and to ensuring in 2030, no later than that, there is a price that will help drive emissions. I'm of the firm belief that if I look at what the sector's doing and how seriously they're taking this, as a former trade minister, because they don't want to be blocked from markets overseas for our products, that the sector will get there in true partnership, but we have the pricing mechanism will be set up to ensure that, so New Zealanders can have certainty that we're serious about it and that the sector is serious about it.